When you go on vacation, you're probably aiming to have a good time, relaxing and de-stressing. Probably sunny beaches, fresh seafood, and shopping. I bet the last thing on your mind is coming across something paranormal. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Simon here. So tonight's story is one sent in by one of you. She wants me to use an alias for her, so let's call her Anita. Now this story involves Anita and her boyfriend, Giac. Anita is Cantonese. Like myself, she grew up in the States, but she speaks Cantonese at home with her parents growing up, so she's fluent. Her boyfriend Giac is Italian-American, and he does not speak Chinese. Anita brought Giac to Hong Kong one summer for vacation a few years back, and something pretty scary happened to them when they spent the night at a well-known hotel in TST. She didn't want to say the name of the hotel since they're still in operation, but she refers to it as Hotel L, like the letter L. As always, please stick around till after the story, where I'm gonna break everything down from a Chinese cultural perspective. Alright, let's turn on the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. Anita has been dating Giac for about 2 years at this point. They met in college, and for summer vacation, she really wanted to bring Giac around Hong Kong. Anita grew up in the States, but she has Hong Kong roots. Her dad is from one of the villages and New Territories, and they still have a village house there, so they always have a place to stay whenever they went to Hong Kong. But of course, Anita and Giac didn't want to stay in the village the whole time in Hong Kong. They wanted to live a little and treat themselves to a nice hotel stay for a night. Anita wanted Giac to have a nice impression for his first time here, and also because she loved him and wanted to spoil him at least for one night. The hotel looked super nice. It was very fancy, and Anita can only afford it for one night, but they figured they would really enjoy it. They would make sure to use all of the amenities to get their money's worth. Anita admitted, though, that this was before she watched any Hong Kong horror episodes. She did not do things like knocking on the door of their room before entering after they checked in. They tapped the keycard on the door handle and went straight inside. The room was very nice. It smelled like lavender. Anita wasn't sure what brand of fragrance they used here, but she definitely wanted to bring some back home. The room was fairly large for Hong Kong standards, and the view was amazing, especially at night when all of the other buildings were lit up outside. They were loving it. So, shortly after checking in, Anita and Giac went out to explore the area. She brought him over to the promenade to check out the water, as well as the Avenue of the Stars, which is kind of like the Hollywood Walk of Fame in California. It's a strip by the water that honors over 100 legends in the Hong Kong film industry. They were both absolutely beat when they got back to their room that night. All of that walking does not mix well with the Hong Kong heat. It's not just the heat, it's mostly the humidity that drains you. They took a shower and passed out almost instantly when their heads hit the pillow. But around 1 a.m., Anita's eyes snapped open. She didn't wake up naturally. She woke up to the sound of heavy static. Anita, still groggy, looked around, and her eyes naturally went over to the TV because it was on for some reason, and it was bright. There was nothing on the screen, just static. That's strange. We didn't even watch TV at all, she thought. As she was looking around for the remote, she looked over to her boyfriend and noticed, in the glow of the TV, that his face was completely drenched. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. He was sobbing, his chest heaving with deep, ragged gasps. Totally forgetting about the remote, Anita instinctively put her hands on Giac's face gently, trying to wake him up, asking him what's wrong. They had a great day, and they weren't fighting or anything like that, so she couldn't figure out why he was sobbing like this. Was he just dreaming? "Giac, babe, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" she asked, her voice laced with panic. Giac didn't wake up, but he started talking in his sleep. But what Giac said made Anita's blood run cold. It wasn't what he said. It was the fact that he said it in Cantonese. Giac doesn't speak Cantonese. It was also a voice that sounded nothing like Giac's normal voice. He said, "老婆，老婆，唔好走啊，唔好跟佢走啊，我冇咗你唔得㗎." This translates to, "Wife, honey, don't go. Don't go with him. I can't live without you." After saying that, he sobbed even harder. He let out a loud, guttural wail that really scared Anita to her core, because she's never heard Giac make that kind of sound before. Terrified now, Anita shook Giac, trying to snap him out of his deep sleep. After what felt like 5 minutes or so, Giac finally snapped out of it and woke up. He looked confused as to why Anita was waking him up so suddenly. Giac's always been a deep sleeper, and he would always get super cranky if anyone woke him up. And that's exactly what happened here. He sucked his teeth and said, "Oh, come on, babe, what? I'm so tired from today." He rolled over and went back to sleep. But the nightmare wasn't over. Anita was terrified at this point, and she just wanted it to be morning already. She turned the TV off. She was extremely exhausted from the day as well, so she did doze off eventually for a few hours. She woke up again around 5 a.m. to strange sounds again. This time, it was the sound of someone talking. Confused as to what was going on, she flipped on the bedside lamp. Giac wasn't in bed anymore. Anita sat up and listened carefully to see where the noise that woke her up was coming from. It was someone talking in Cantonese again, the same voice she heard Giac speaking in earlier in the night. She heard it very clearly coming from the bathroom. Bathroom light was off, but Anita heard the voice coming from inside, speaking in Cantonese, saying something along the lines of, "你點解要咁做啊？你點解要咁做啫?" Which means, "Why did you have to do that? Why did you have to do that?" in a really loud tone, as if he was yelling at something. Anita slowly got up from bed and tiptoed her way over to the bathroom. It was dark in there, so she switched on the bathroom light. That's when she saw Giac sitting on the toilet. His eyes were open, but once the light went on, it was as if Anita woke him up from sleeping. He raised his hand up to block his eyes from the sudden light. "Babe, what are you doing?" he yelled. "Giac, what in the world is happening? What are you doing?" Anita yelled back. Giac ignored her, came out of the bathroom, and went back to sleep instantly. Anita couldn't do this anymore. This time, she shook him with everything she had to wake him up. Giac finally woke up looking confused. It finally seemed like he was back to his normal self now. Anita explained everything Giac did, but he had no recollection of any of it. The speaking in Cantonese, the sitting in the bathroom in the dark. He remembers none of it at all. This incident was extremely unsettling to Anita. It would have been less scary if Giac didn't speak in Cantonese. If he was speaking English, then she could try to explain it away as maybe he was so tired that he was dreaming and sleepwalking, even though he's never slept walk before. She was glad that they only booked the room for one night, because the next morning she couldn't get out of there fast enough. So, Hong Kong Horror Family, what do you think happened here to Giac? Please Pause the video here and share what you think in the comments below. Alright, so what do I personally think happened here from a Chinese cultural perspective? In stories like this, language is often viewed as part of one's conscious identity. Yisik. If someone is sleep-talking, they usually speak in languages they already know. When a person suddenly begins speaking a language they have never learned, traditional explanations often fall into the category of 借口說話, which literally translates to borrowing a mouth to speak. The idea is that another consciousness is temporarily using a person's body as a medium to express thoughts or emotions. This concept appears throughout Southern Chinese folk religion. The things that Giac said that night, I don't think these are random dream fragments. They sound remarkably specific. I believe a spirit was speaking through Giac in that hotel, where it was communicating the same emotional event, which was most likely the spirit's zapnim, or his anchor, a powerful, unresolved obsession or fixation. Zapnim is one of the most common explanations for why a spirit remains in the human world. From what the spirit says through Giac, it sounds like it most likely died from some sort of tragedy related to romance. Kind of sounds like maybe this man's wife cheated on him, and he possibly did something impulsive and tragic, like in his own life. I believe what Giac experienced is something we call fusan, which is a spirit attachment or temporary possession. Now, I'm not saying that this is a full-on possession like in the movies, but something much more subtle. Giac has all of the telltale signs associated with fusan. Cases of this almost always involve sleep states, wandering behavior, speaking strangely, acting like another person, as well as memory loss afterwards. The fact that Giac spoke Cantonese, a language he does not normally speak, is the biggest giveaway that this was something external. To sum it up nicely, I think a male spirit that was carrying a powerful zapnim connected to love and betrayal, and possibly ending oneself, was somehow attached to the location. Whether the spirit was consciously present or whether it was an emotional imprint is harder to determine based on the details presented by Anita. During sleep, Giac became the conduit through which the spirit's emotions came out. All of the emotions expressed revolved around grief, which is often considered one of the strongest chains that can bind a spirit to the world of the living. The old saying is that some spirits do not stay because they hate the living. They stay because they can't let go of what they love. Some of you might be thinking, so was this spirit a conscious spirit, or something closer to a residual haunting where there's no consciousness? That's a great question. I would say yes, this spirit would definitely lean closer to the semi-conscious side than a purely residual imprint. Consciousness is present, but it's also not fully conscious, like some of the spirits we've come across in past stories. The biggest reason I say this is because this spirit actively used the living person's body as a conduit. This requires consciousness to do, but at the same time, it's not fully conscious because it's dominated by one single emotion, which is grief. So why did the spirit choose Giac as the conduit over Anita? This is an interesting question. I think the spirit wanted to choose Giac because they were both male. It wanted to express an experience from the perspective of an abandoned husband, a role which Giac was closer to than Anita. This is why in some possession cases, or temporary possession cases, 借身, which translates to borrowing a body, it's said that spirits sometimes use the living person who resembles their former self or emotional state. Also, this sounds strange, but in many similar ghost stories, a spirit trapped in a strong emotion does not interact normally. These types of spirits do not necessarily see reality clearly. Imagine you're having a recurring nightmare. inside that nightmare, the people you see are not really the people they are in real life. The situation you see is also not really the situation in real life either. Now, imagine the spirit as always being a part of a nightmare that they can't wake up from. He may have seen Giac as himself. That would explain why it's using Giac's body. It wasn't possessing a stranger. It was recreating a scene. When you think of professions most likely to cross paths with paranormal, a few obvious ones probably come to mind, but I'm willing to bet that home renovation isn't on your list. So this next story was submitted by a viewer, and it's about a terrifying experience that happened to her uncle, who we'll call Agit, over in Hong Kong. Agit took on a routine job to gut and remodel an old apartment unit, only to discover that dealing with the supernatural wasn't exactly in his contract. As always, please stick around until after the story, as I'll break everything down from a Chinese cultural perspective. So let's go ahead, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. This happened back in the late 90s to Agit. Agit spent his whole life working in Zhongsao, the Cantonese term for renovations and remodeling. By his early 40s, after years of working for someone else, he had finally scraped together enough money to start his own contracting business. He was a one-man show. He took on straightforward solo gigs, installing a shower, laying down new floors, repainting an entire flat. Simple stuff, where he could just put his head down and work alone. He was incredibly meticulous, and his clients loved him. For the most part, his jobs were pretty routine, totally ordinary, until he took one job in Wu Kai Sa. The gig itself didn't seem memorable at first. He was hired to gut and renovate an old apartment unit. The owner was a guy around Agit's age. He wanted new flooring, a fresh coat of paint, and the ceiling redone. They agreed on a price. He then handed over the keys, and that was it. The owner didn't live there, so Agit had the place entirely to himself. As long as the flat was finished by the deadline, nobody was going to breathe down his neck. No micromanaging here. Just get the job done. One suffocating Tuesday afternoon, Agit was completely alone in the unit. The old floorboards were ripped up already now, and the air was thick with dust. Agit was on his hands and knees, laying down the new flooring. To keep the dust from drifting into the hallway and annoying the neighbors, he had taped a thick, heavy plastic sheeting completely over the front doorway to contain the dust inside. He was drenched in sweat, exhausted, and just wanting to power through the day. While he was hammering a board into place, a strange sound bled through the plastic sheet at the front door. It sounded like a violin, but it wasn't a song. It was random violin notes, like someone absent-mindedly dragging a bow across the strings who had no idea how to actually play. What made it weird was how close it sounded. The concrete walls in these old Hong Kong apartments were thick. For the sound to be that sharp, a person had to be playing it right outside in the hallway. Agit tried to tune it out at first, assuming it was a bored kid messing around. But the screeching went on for about 30 minutes straight. It started driving him insane. He finally dropped his hammer, pulled back the plastic tarp at the front door, and marched out into the hallway to tell whoever it was that was outside to knock it off. He looked left, and then he looked right. The corridor was completely empty. All of the neighbors' heavy iron gates were padlocked shut. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Everyone was at work, and the kids were still at school. Agit stood in the dead silence of the hall, waiting for the violin sounds to start up again. But there was nothing. That's weird, he thought. He stepped back inside and taped the plastic sheet firmly shut again, ready to get back to work. The next afternoon, Agit was kneeling by the entrance, sorting through his box of tools when a shadow eclipsed the light bleeding through the plastic doorway. Someone was standing right outside, pressing close, trying to look through the frosted plastic. Who the heck is that? Giac thought. He peeled back the edge of the tarp. Standing inches from his face was an old woman. She was severely hunched over, dressed in a traditional dark blue floral silk outfit. The kind of old school outfit you commonly see older Hong Kong grandmothers wearing. You probably know what I'm talking about if you're Chinese. It's like once these Hong Kong grandmas reach a certain age, they all end up shopping at the same place for the same clothes. "Auntie, can I help you?" Giac said, stepping into the doorframe. "Please, don't stand so close. This is a construction site. I don't want you getting hurt." The old woman stared at him with cloudy, confused eyes. "Hao sang zai." "Young man," she croaked. "Zhuang sao wa." "Doing renovations, huh?" "Yes, Auntie. Now please, head back to your home. It's not safe here, and it's dusty." The woman didn't respond. She just stared at him blankly for a long moment, then slowly turned and began shuffling away down the corridor. Giac sighed, assuming she was just being a nosy, bored neighbor trying to see what was going on. He taped the door shut again and got back to work. The next day, Giac was working near the front door again when he heard a new sound. Scuff, scuff, scuff. It was the distinct sound of slippers dragging heavily across the concrete floor while walking. Giac pulled back the plastic, just a crack, and peeked out. It was the same old woman. She was pacing the hallway, but she wasn't walking anywhere specific. She was walking in totally random directions. She would shuffle up to a random closed apartment door, stop, stare at it with a blank look on her face, and then turn away to shuffle to the next one. As she moved, Giac could hear a heavy jade bracelet clinking sharply against her bony wrist. He felt concerned. Does she have dementia? He wondered. Where's her family? He stepped out into the hall. "Auntie, are you lost? Is everything okay?" She didn't even respond. It was as if he wasn't even there to her. She completely ignored his voice, continuing her slow, dragging shuffle toward the heavy metal fire door at the end of the hall. She pushed it open with surprising ease and disappeared into the stairwell. Giac put his tools down and hurried after her, worried that she might trip and fall down the stairs. He grabbed the heavy fire door, the rusted hinges screeching loudly as he pushed it open. He looked down the stairs, totally empty. He looked up the stairs as well, also empty. The stairwell was dead silent. There was absolutely no way a frail hunched-over woman could have cleared the entire flight of stairs in just 2 seconds without making a single sound. A deep, unsettling feeling settled in Giac's stomach. This is when he started feeling scared. When Monday rolled around, the owner of the apartment dropped by to check on the renovation progress. Giac, his nerves were completely frayed from the past few days. He couldn't hold his tongue. He told the owner about the noise. He mentioned the terrible scratching violin playing during the day. Then he brought up the senile old woman in a blue silk outfit who kept wandering the halls. The owner stopped dead in his tracks. All the color drained from his face. He grabbed Giac by the arm, pulled him away from the front door, and shakily pulled out his wallet out of his back pocket. He slipped the photograph out and held it up. "Giac, by any chance, is this the woman you've been seeing?" Giac's jaw practically hit the floor. It was a family portrait. Sitting front and center, wearing the exact same dark blue floral silk outfit and a jade bracelet on her wrist, was the old woman from the hallway. That's my mother," the owner whispered, his voice trembling. "She passed away about a week ago. She lived in this exact unit for 50 years. He swallowed hard, staring at the gutted floorboards. She was a music teacher. She taught violin out of this living room for decades." Agit nearly quit on the spot, but he was a small business owner now. He couldn't just quit because he felt scared. He needed the money, and walking off a half-finished job would ruin his reputation. For the final few days on the project, Agit was a nervous wreck. He brought in a boombox and blasted the radio at top volume to drown out the sound of the phantom violin sounds. He kept his head down, his eyes glued to the floorboards, and flat out refused to look at the plastic sheeting at the front door, even when he heard the heavy scuff, scuff, scuff of slippers dragging right outside the door. Luckily, he never saw that woman's face again. The second he wrapped up and received his payment, he got the heck out of that building. So, Hong Kong horror family, what do you think happened here to Agit? Please, pause the video here and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Alright, so this is a really interesting story. If I were analyzing the story purely through the lens of traditional Chinese ghost lore, I think the most interesting possibility is not that the old woman was haunting the apartment, but that she was trying to return to it, but could no longer recognize it due to the renovations going on. In my culture, a person's attachment to their home can be extraordinarily strong. There is a saying that people do not simply live in a house. Over time, the house becomes a part of them. This idea is sometimes associated with Giac, the accumulated spiritual atmosphere and energy of a household. After 50 years in the same apartment, every part of that woman's life would have been connected to that space. She taught violin there, she slept there, she raised her family there, she even grew old there. From a traditional perspective, Tsupnim, her strongest attachments and emotional ties would naturally be centered in that home. The timing here is also extremely important. The owner says that she died about a week earlier. Do all of you know where I'm going with this? Do you remember the seventh-day return, Tao Tut? If you recall, death is not viewed as an instant transition in Chinese culture. The soul is believed to pass through a 49-day cycle, known as Tut Tut Seisap Gaoyat. During this time, the deceased is sometimes referred to as a San Mong Yan, a newly departed soul that has not yet fully completed its journey into the afterlife. Because she is still within that transitional period, it wouldn't be unusual for her spirit to revisit places that were deeply important to her. I'm confident that she's not a vengeful spirit. She never threatens Agit or attacks him or anything like that. Instead, she appears confused. I personally think she was trying to find her way home, but due to the fact that her old home looks totally different now, she's lost. She can't find her home. She knows that it's in the vicinity as she roams the hallway, but she can't pinpoint it. Some of you might be thinking, but wait, how can she not recognize her home just because of the renovations? Shouldn't she recognize the door number? That's a good question. So what we have to keep in mind here is that spirits do not perceive the world exactly the same way that we do as living people. Newly deceased spirits, called Mongwan or Yamwan, usually exist in a transitional state. The soul has left the physical body, but it hasn't necessarily left behind its memories and attachments. These attachments are often described as Tsupnim, the lingering thoughts and emotional bonds that tie a spirit to the human world. Because of this, spirits are believed to navigate our world less through physical sight and more through emotional connection. Think of it like this. How do you find your way around your home in the dark? We don't consciously measure distances or study every single wall. We just know where things are because our memory has it intertwined with the space. It's believed that spirits function in a very similar way. It returns expecting to find its home exactly as it remembers. If that expectation is shattered, they will become confused and lost. Think of your own home in the dark. If someone starts putting up random walls and changing things around, you would probably be confused too, right? This old woman is now lost because her internal map of reality no longer matches to the external world. Her floors are gone, furniture gone, walls stripped. It's a totally different apartment to her now. So now the question is, can this old woman be helped? Is there a way for her to recognize where her home is? Yes, there is. Do you have any thoughts on what this might be? I'll give you a few seconds to think. The answer is an altar. I'm talking about a traditional Chinese ancestor altar, which has a photograph of the deceased, an ancestral tablet, incense, and offerings of fruit. After the renovations, the owner will most likely have to set up. This altar will serve as a symbolic bridge between the living and the dead. It would immediately let her spirit know that this is your place. Spirits are often thought to respond more strongly to relationships and recognition than physical objects. Even though the apartment looks completely different now, seeing her photograph, ancestral tablet, and offerings should be enough. This is actually a traditional idea called Yinglo, literally recognizing the way or finding the root. You'll sometimes hear older Chinese people talk about helping a spirit recognize where it belongs. Rituals after death are partly intended to help orient the deceased and guide them toward the next stage of existence. Under this worldview, an altar functions almost like a signpost, not necessarily saying this is your home, but rather your family is here. And that distinction is important. Traditional Chinese ancestor worship is generally not intended to keep the spirit attached to the house forever. It's intended to gradually shift the spirit's attachment away from the physical home and toward the ancestral lineage. In other words, instead of thinking, my apartment is my home, the deceased gradually comes to think, my family and ancestors are where I belong. This connects to the practice of Tudou, guiding the spirit onward, and Zaizhou, ancestor veneration. So while an altar might help her recognize the apartment again, temporarily, because it contains familiar symbols tied to her identity, the ultimate goal is not for her to remain attached to that apartment. The goal is for her to recognize that her family remembers her. Her responsibilities are now finished, as she can continue her journey in peace. Usually, once she sees that her family has honored her properly, she no longer needs to keep searching for her home. This is why many Chinese funeral customs focus so heavily on acknowledgement. The belief is that a forgotten spirit wanders, while a remembered spirit knows where it belongs. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror Family, for making it all the way to the end of this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed this one.